How do I find my telos? Is it possible for a Christian to know with any degree of certainty what God's purpose is for his life? If so, how? I thought this was a good question to start talking about as we are exploring the imagery of the cave, right? Because this is a search for which our faculties are not instantly well equipped, right? We're not born into this world knowing how to seek the good, the true, and the beautiful. We have this kind of inkling, this hunger for it. And so that's the first suggestion that I would make, right? Is in prayer and over time, seek the little tugs of your heart that resist everything in the material world, the world of becoming and changing, right? If you're hungry one day and you get angry, that's not the voice of your telos, right? That's just your kind of animal, material flesh speaking, right? Seek the voice in you that resists the flesh. What is it that makes you say, "Oh, I'm really tired, but I'm going to get up early anyway to do X because I want to do X," right? And maybe X is not like what you're going to do for a career. Maybe it's just sort of something that you happen to, maybe it's part of it or maybe it's contained within. I mean, I went through like 5 different careers as a kid that I wanted to be in. I'm talking like high school and college, and each one contained something in it that was a portion of what I was ultimately meant to be doing, I believe. So for instance, for a while I wanted to be an actor, right? And for reasons that I will shortly get into, I didn't end up pursuing that. But I run a podcast and I do a lot of public speaking, and that training is like totally useful and totally part of me, right? It's part of me to want to be a showman, to make people laugh, to make people think, and that element of my nature was being fulfilled by acting. It was just like sort of a little bit off. It's just off to the side, and so you kind of course correct, right? You say, well, maybe not an actor, maybe an academic, right? And academia was great for me in a lot of ways. There were also things that I thought, I'd like to sort of be more public facing. So you start to adjust like a ship trying to find its North Star. It's like you veer too far to the right. Well, that wasn't quite right. But you are going in a direction, right? My mom has a phrase: God can't drive a parked car, right? So pick something that you're feeling tugged to in that way. Where the spirit is tugging against the flesh. What are you feeling tugged to? And then, invest in it. Put your all into it. See what happens, especially if you're young, right? Try it out. And you might find that there are certain things about it that you like, certain things about it that you don't, but at least you'll have gathered some information. And it's easier to course correct from like 45 degrees to 35 degrees than it is to like turn all the way around or start moving to begin with. That's advice number 1. Advice number 2, how do you course correct, right? Once you've picked something, let's say you know that you really love woodworking. So you wake up and you decide you want to be a carpenter, but then you sort of how do you realize that that's actually not the way to fulfill that urge? Again, in prayer, right? Always talking it over with God. The next question to ask yourself is, what's the thing I like doing even when it's going badly? Because this is how I learned that I was not cut out to be an actor. I loved being on stage, still love performing, still sing from time to time. But I didn't love all of the grunt work that went into it, especially if there was no payoff. So if I didn't have a big role in a show or was just trying to do it to help a friend and I was having to hang lights, I never enjoyed that. I wasn't having fun, and I kind of considered it drudgery. And what that suggested to me is that I liked the rewards of acting, but I actually didn't like acting in and of itself, right? Aristotle makes a distinction between things we do so we can get other things, work we do so we can get money, right? For example, versus things that we do for their own sake, like painting, even if you're not being paid for it. So I realized that I didn't love acting really in its entirety, because acting is not just the thing that the audience sees, right? Acting is this entire lifetime of process and work. And so when I said I liked acting, what I really meant was I like, the payoff of acting. By contrast, I noticed that even when I was writing something nobody was going to see, just sitting in the library and cracking my head against books was itself pleasurable to me. Even when it was like not successful, even when there were disappointments, I liked the process. And so I always tell people, discern between things that you like in their entirety. Right? When you say I like fishing, right? Ask yourself whether you really mean that. Do you like driving to the feed store, buying the worms, hooking them on a hook, right? Every part of it? Or do you just like holding the big prize bass in your hand, right? So I would say those two things, seek the tug that pulls against the flesh, and then ask yourself whether the thing that you're doing is something you like in its entirety for itself or only for its benefits. You will not go far wrong with those two procedures for eventually guiding yourself towards your telos, which, by the way, is a lifelong thing, right? Telos, to be teleos, which is translated in the Bible as perfect, be perfect as your Father is perfect, just means completion, right? To be complete in what you are. And so it's not like you're going to land on your career or the right partner or whatever, and then you'll be set for life. This is a process, and those two guideposts are how you do the process.